So, I received a question, and it's pretty in-depth, but I'm relating to it. So, I'm going to give the best answer, clearest answer that I can. Okay, so, this subscriber wrote, "I've got a question for you, John. I play guitar, and after a session of watching NIRVANA videos on YouTube, it's often the case that I feel like picking up the guitar and playing for an hour or two. When you were watching Nirvana's band practices in person, was there ever the urge to be like, let me sit in for one song? I feel like playing the drums now. Being both a guitarist and drummer, if you had to pin down where your focus was, would you say it was on Chad's parts, or were you mainly focusing on Kurt's guitar or vocals?" First thing, we got to go back 30 years. I only got to see one band practice. Kurt was, I think overall, they were pretty private with band practices. I mean, I was never invited to another band practice, and the band practice I was invited to was before they put out their 7-inch. So, yeah, it was more like, hey, John, come out and hang out, watch band practice, and whatever, hang out in Aberdeen. So that's what myself and friend Paul Hunt did. Anyway, first off, yeah, so that's the only one band practice that I went to, and I remember specifically. I can visualize. I mean, we're sitting on the floor in the band room. So this is after we actually did jam after they practiced. We all switched instruments. Paul was left-handed, so he could play Kurt's guitar, and I played drums. I played bass a little bit. I remember playing drums some. Kurt played drums. Kurt just sang and kind of did spoken weirdness. And we just jammed for a while. And Chris and Chad played. Yeah, Chad also played bass. So anyway, that's the jam session was. The only thing I can compare it to, I remember leaving and thinking of the Butthole Surfers or something. It was, it was noisy and kind of all over the place. It wasn't like we were really coming up with songs. But I just wanted to say that, because that's the memory of, yeah, I mean, absolutely, watching them practice, absolutely wanted to jam. Absolutely, I mean, no doubt about it. But I think that when it comes to explaining being inspired by Nirvana to play guitar or drums or whatever, that makes a lot of sense. It's hard to explain why, but yeah, being inspired. I don't really now. If I listen to Nirvana, it doesn't make me want to pick up a guitar. It's not the same. I think back in 1988, that's all. It's all I listened to. I mean, I listened to I listened to the tapes. I mean, I did. I listened to the tapes that Kurt gave me, and then if I had a record, but the thing is with back then, I just had a 7-inch, and then Chris gave me a copy of Bleach at one point, but CDs weren't even available, so I listened to those tapes. Those tapes were, that was the Nirvana that I listened to, and I shared with friends. Very inspiring. Yes. Absolutely, I was inspired to play guitar and write songs, and drums. Maybe not as much drums, because my I think way more guitar, absolutely. Like in my guitar playing, Kurt inspired me um, so much. In drumming, um, it's different. Like that was like Nirvana didn't inspire me drumming. Like in fact, I think I listened to Chad playing and I heard different things that I would play sometimes, or I think Chad's a really killer drummer too. No doubt about it. I don't think I would have added in the double bass parts. I think simplifying parts. That's one thing like Dave did in a sense. He was just solid, hit hard, and he played pretty simple at times, and that's kind of what I envisioned more. Myself. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to, let's see, you said let me sit in for a song. I feel like playing drums now. Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, way more inspired to play guitar. Kurt understood in a sense, like, you just don't have another drummer like sit in on Nirvana songs at a band practice. It's just kind of like band practices were one of those things. It's like those of you that are in bands will understand. Like having somebody to your band practice is like playing a set for one person. Does that make sense? Seriously, like having one person to your band practice is not in the band. It will throw off the practice. So, I understood. I mean, at that whole time, that same time, I was in bands, and it's kind of like it was very rare that Machine or Subvert or whoever, whatever bands I was in, we unless somebody lived in the house we were practicing in, and that was still like, usually if they lived in the house, they'd be sick of hearing us practice, Subvert or whoever, so they wouldn't really be in the practice room. It would be like, oh my god, they're practicing again, Yeah, I think I answered it pretty good, but that's, I mean, yeah, I think you touched on some important points, and one is like being inspired to play guitar or drums, after you listen to music, and in this case, it would be after you listen to, a session of Nirvana videos or whatever, and it's inspiring. So yeah, absolutely. And that's, it really touches me so many different ways to see just how things are progressing, because there's no other band I could think of that should be as inspiring to the future of musicians, and the future. I mean, there's tons of great bands like the Pixies, and freaking like tons of great punk bands and metal bands and indie bands. Built to Spill. I mean, there's so many good bands out there. It's heavy, you guys. I mean, I get into this type of going back to the past and reliving it and taking it in, and then relating my experience, and it's intense. And hey, so what you just watched was recorded yesterday, and I watched it back a couple times. I almost redid it, but I thought, I could just edit it and add in this. So, it's funny, like, trying to explain being inspired by Nirvana songs. The number one thing in that whole video I didn't say, I would definitely say Kurt's vocals. I mean, hands down, you know, Kurt's vocals are the most inspiring thing in Nirvana. And actually, you know, he's really, comes down to it, one of the most inspiring vocalists I've ever heard. And so yeah, I wanted to put that because I didn't talk about his, you know, him as a vocalist. You know, it's almost like the obvious.